we get through the first course, and I'm just on pure adrenaline. I haven't slept in 2 days at this point. And Steven gets really emotional. He's that kind of human being, and he just stops and he goes, "Where have you been?"
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm thrilled as always to be here with you. Paul, how are you, good sir?
I'm great, and also happy to be here. Thanks again for inviting me, David.
Oh, anytime. The door is always open. And someone else that opened his door to us very generously is Mr. Buck Johnson, who's the guest on this episode. So Buck, as you'll hear, is the keys player for Aerosmith and has been so for a long number of years now, coming up to 10 years. And deservedly so. When you hear about Buck's upbringing from essentially playing music at 5 professionally or semi-professionally, you can see why he's got the gigs he has, and his production career, live playing career, and just general career has been amazing, Paul.
Yeah, Buck is an absolute, the best word I can think of to describe him is a gentleman.
Yes.
And we are about to, or you are about to hear the real values he places around working hard, being prepared, and he's very humble, and I think downplays his ability quite a bit, David.
Yes. So no, look, amazing chatting to Buck. So we hope you enjoy this one a great deal, and then we'll chat to you after the show. Buck, thank you, sir, for joining us. It's such a pleasure and privilege to have you on the show.
Hey, David and Paul's pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me.
So for our listeners and viewers, Buck very kindly agreed to this interview in the midst of an Aerosmith final world tour. It's an enormous undertaking. We'll talk about that. But, sadly, last Saturday, Steven Tyler had a small health issue that's totally, resolvable. But you're on a bit of a hiatus just for a couple of weeks, Buck.
Yeah, that's correct. Unfortunately, it is that type of cold and flu season, and there's a new outbreak of COVID. Fortunately, it wasn't COVID. It was just, a bit of that and a bit of just overdoing it. We've been rehearsing for a month, and then we did the first 3 shows, and I think it was just, all right, well, let's take a break. Let's take a pause, and I think it'll be a blessing in disguise for the full run. We can figure out a few things that need to be ironed out, and then we'll hit back up, and hopefully in a month.
Great. Yeah, no, looking forward to that. And as I said, we'll talk lots more about that. So I thought we'd start at the start, Buck. You've had a fascinating start in life in music from a very, very young age. I'm just wondering if you could sort of give us the short overview of your amazing upbringing as far as traveling, playing music from, I believe, the age of 5.
Correct. Yeah, I was really blessed. I grew up in a musical family. And we all sang and played instruments, mainly singing. My dad and his brothers and my mom on piano had a Southern gospel quartet called the Johnson Brothers Quartet, and we traveled with a van and a trailer throughout the South, and mostly, Saturday night singings, and on Sundays what they call in the South all day singing and dinner on the ground, which meant covered dishes, lots of casseroles and fried chicken. Gorge yourself on all that, and now go sing. And we had the custom column PA and the whole bit. But my mom's an incredible piano player, and they all just grew up singing together. Growing up in the Depression in Alabama, singing was part of their life and what they did. So it was instilled in me, and Mom says I was singing before I was walking. And so I could sing on pitch. I had a strong voice, so they threw me up on stage. So I didn't know any different. This is the life I knew. So I grew up in it, so I always tell them it's your fault because it's in my blood now. And I never saw myself do anything different. So I was lucky in that way that I knew at an early age what I wanted to do. And I was blessed and fortunate enough that I got to choose that.
Did you have a sense, Buck, that was different to other kids and what they were doing, or for you was it like, as you said, well, it's just what we do, it's part of the family? Did you sort of have that sense of, this is a little bit different and special?
I didn't know it was special, but I knew it was a little different. I mean, I think in the South, music, it was, especially at that time period in the 70s, it's a part of everyday life, church going, singing in church, singing in choirs. I sang in choirs and all those things, which I think is a wonderful thing to sing. When the instrument is from within the human body and it is shared and you're singing with others and you're learning how to blend with others, it's a universal thing. I think if the world did more of that together, we'd have a greater place, more peace on the earth. Anyway, no, I always grew up singing harmonies with them, and that's just something that a lot of my cousins sang. A lot of people I hung around with. We had bands, we had little groups, and I think it was so many of us that did that. I don't think of myself as anything special. I just thought I'm just another one of those who could sing. I think I'm the one that was crazy enough to think he can make a career of it. So, no, seriously, a lot of people in my family, they're super talented, and they could have chose that career path, but they had kids and they had other passions, and so I don't think, I don't recommend it for a lot of those, but I just say that I'm really blessed that I get to do it.
So talking about growing up singing, it was something you had a talent for, and as you said, it was part of the culture, what you did. What attracted you to playing the piano?
Well, as I said, my mom played the piano, and she's way better than me. She was a prodigy, and at some point, she tried to teach me, but as we all know, sometimes great players, are not necessarily good teachers. And I wasn't a good student with my mom. So I think around the time I was getting in seventh grade, I started hearing songs on the radio, and hey, I want to learn how to play that song, and there was an old, I don't even remember the model because it was so long ago. And the other side of the basement, we had two sides of the basement. I helped my dad refinish one side, the nice side with the shag carpet and the paneling. And then the other side where his tools were, where we had the old upright that was out of tune. But I could go there and no one would bother me. And I could pick out, I heard this, I think it was Billy Joel's, She's Got Away off of Songs in the Attic live version, right? And I wanted to learn how to play that song, or I heard an Elton John song and would play that, or Ray Charles, or Stevie Wonder, and I would pick it out because I had the ear. I think you develop that from being around musical people and singing, and I knew enough like where the chords were. And then my mom found a teacher, Miss Gillespie, who in 2 years taught me more than I learned in years. She was phenomenal. She was mad at me when I quit because once I got to a certain place, I could accompany myself and write songs. I'm done. I'm good. And I wish I'd stuck with her a little longer. But she was great. She used to say, I have a recording of one of my lessons, and I'm playing this Chopin piece, and she stops me because I keep making the same mistake. And I say in this big, thick, molasses-driven accent, "Oh, Miss Gillespie, I swear I practice. It's just careless mistakes." And she said, "Well, now, Buck, I think most mistakes are careless." And she said, when you practice, you have to have an imaginary audience. You imagine there's an audience there when you're practicing. That was gold. And so every time, I always say in my business, before I even step into a rehearsal room with a band, I've already rehearsed to rehearse. And so I've put in the hours beforehand, and I imagine that I got to get through this without like stopping, it's not about doing it till you don't make a mistake. It's or till you get it right. It's doing it till you don't make a mistake. And so that's the model anyway. But that's my passion to get into keyboards, is then it was so I could sing and accompany myself and write songs.
So, Buck, going from, that amazing upbringing in music, and then what sort of led to you? Did you go to college or went straight into professional music outside of school? What sort of got you into the adult arena and progressing your career further?
Well, as we all do, we have to attract the girls in school. We get into a band or we play sports. And so I started bands in junior high school, and playing all the skating rinks and the pool parties. And then in high school, more of the same. I got to go to this small liberal arts college called Birmingham Southern College in Birmingham, Alabama. And I got to go because my mom was smart enough to get a job there. She worked at the bookstore. And at the time, if you'd been an employee for a certain number of years, your children could go tuition remission. So I got to go for free, but I had to get the grades. And I think when I went for my ACTs, um, I had a gig the night before, and I was probably a little tired, possibly a little hungover, and I didn't score as well as I probably could have, but it was good enough to get into school. And I said, okay, I'm good. Anyway, so I went to Birmingham Southern, which has an amazing fine arts program there. That's where I met my wife, Kim. We were both in concert choir together, and which was an amazing experience. This director at the time, Hugh Thomas, was a legend, and you learn more about life in a rehearsal than just music. But he would always say, you had to come in and already know your notes. Rhythm came first. And once we got all the dynamic markings and all the parts right, now it's time to make music. Because a choral experience could be the most boring thing most of the time people sit through, or it could be the most heart-opening thing that someone can listen to. And I think that's true. And I got to do Bach's B minor Mass with full symphony, Beethoven's Ninth, of course, and many others. An experience I never would have gotten otherwise, and something out of my realm growing up singing gospel and blues and country and rock, but yeah, it was really good for me to experience that. Took voice. I actually got a degree in business. And then right after school, Kim and I moved to Los Angeles. And so in the 90s, I spent most of my time there, and until mid 2000s. And everyone asked me from time to time, how do you get into this? I was like, well, it's relationships. I don't know where you start, but I just put myself out there. I said yes to every gig I could grab. And, you make friends, and people see, oh, by the way, you play keys too, don't you? Because I was just a singer. Like, oh, yeah, okay. Well, I got a gig, you'll make some money. I'm like, okay. And then that led to, I had a band, we got a publishing deal, and then we're supposed to be the next big thing. It didn't happen, but then that led to, Chris Steele, Stephen Steele's son, needs a keyboard player who can sing. He's got a record coming out on Atlantic Records. Okay, I did that. And then another son of Tal Bachman, Randy Bachman's son, had a record out on Columbia. I went and made the record with him in Maui with Bob Rock producing. This is 99. And had a hit song called She's So High.
Absolutely.
Did the keys and backing vocals. So I was always the keys backing vocalist guy. And that led to other artists like John Waite, which was great because then I reunited with my brother from another mother, Damon Johnson, who's from Birmingham, Alabama, and had a band called Brother Kane, who now is the guitarist in Lynyrd Skynyrd. And so Damon and I did John Waite and got to sing all these baby songs with John Waite and all of his hits. And then just I'm sorry to go on, but one gig leads to the next. You meet somebody in this situation, and then they know about you. And I think it's important not just to be a professional and be ready musically, but to be a good person and get along with others, because sometimes you're living with each other on a tour bus,
Yeah, that's right. It's about the hang as much as the technique. And so, Buck, you're not going on at all because you've just rattled off some impressive feats there, and I'd like to explore some of them a little bit more. So we'll get to John Waite, but let's talk about, so was Brother Kane one of the first, aside from session work, one of the first bands that you were more regularly touring or working with?
No, I wasn't with Brother Kane in the beginning. No. I am with him now.
Yeah.
No, I had moved to L.A., so I moved to L.A. to get a record deal. Damon stayed in Birmingham and got a record deal.
Okay.
So, and deservingly so. But indirectly, Brother Kane was, Damon wrote the songs with this guy, Marty Fredrickson, who produced the Brother Kane albums, well, two of them at least, and wrote the songs with Damon. And when they came out, Brother Kane opened for Aerosmith. And John Kalodner, the A&R man for Aerosmith at the time, loved Brother Kane, loved their song that was out, Got No Shame, just a kick-ass Southern rock song. And, who's the guy working with these guys? And it was Marty. So he brought Marty into Aerosmith. He started writing with Joe, and then he wrote Jaded with Steven and co-producer albums with them. So indirectly, I knew Marty. Marty knew me, and then how many years later down the road, it was in 2014 that I get a call from Marty out of the blue. Hey, Aerosmith needs the guy that does what you do. You got to sing as high, actually sing higher, full voice than Steven Tyler. You got to play keys and you got to play acoustic guitar. And it just seems to be the right gig for me. So anyway, that all works out. But yes, it was those relationships. But no, now I do play with Brother Kane.
Yeah.
We've done some shows, and we're about to release the, I guess since, well, it was 90, it would be 30-year anniversary of the first album release.
Wow.
This year. And so there'll be a release of that and a couple of new tracks added.
Wow, and you've got to fit that in amongst everything else. So you've alluded to, Buck, the call from Marty and so on. So I'll jump to that and then we'll come back. Because I know in another interview, you have this brilliant way of summarising how you approach for Aerosmith. So obviously you knew Marty, you were aware they were after someone, but I believe the actual call to jump on a plane and get to Turkey was relatively sudden. Do you want to tell us that little story about how you had a sudden indoctrination into playing live with Aerosmith?
Well, I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. So yes, I had a call from Marty, and then I realized after about a few weeks that, all right, they're already in Europe. Probably they worked out their deal with their guy that they had. So I go visit Mom for Mother's Day in Alabama. She still plays at a church, and her Mother's Day wish was for me and her and my dad to sing a song or two in church. And so Kim and I went down there, and right before we leave to get in the car to go to the church, we get a call from Steven, from Istanbul. I told Mom, you go ahead, you got to start the service, I'll catch up. And we basically talked for a few minutes about, I came highly recommended from Marty and what my background was, my influences. And I named a few, but the one that stuck with him was Leon Russell. And so we hit it off on that. And they wanted to make sure I had a passport and all these things, like I was ready to go. And I always tell people, look, be ready. You never know when that call is going to happen. Have your gear ready. Have your passport ready. All those things. And because it happens that fast. And so after church, we sing the songs. Church service ends. I'm like, Mom, I got to skip brunch. I got to get back to Nashville. And I make it back to Nashville and, immediately go into full steam ahead, downloading songs I didn't already have into my phone, charting what I could chart. Kim's packing. I had just enough time. I stayed up all night doing this, getting everything I thought I might need, because I'm going to be in Europe for a couple months, right? And, had enough time to take a shower, get to the airport, fly to Istanbul, which I don't know how many hours. That's 15, 16 hours said and done. And the whole time I'm not sleeping, of course, because I'm woodshedding, I'm listening, I'm making notes. Thankfully I had, my iPad, and I used Unreal Book at the time, which for me, it was not just about chords, because some songs I could just hear, but it was more about the lyric and where to sing the harmonies. Because a lot of times it's sing this line a third above, skip this line, sing those two words, go down below Stephen here, things like that. And I use a yellow highlighter for that. Different highlighters for different reasons, And then I get to Istanbul. Eventually I get to the venue. It's a pre-production day, and I meet Stephen, and we go into his dressing room. I grab acoustic guitar, and Marty did tell me he probably is going to want you to sing Crying first, because it's one of the higher harmony parts. I think it's a high E flat that I sing. And I'm like, okay, no problem. I'll learn it on acoustic too, and thankfully I did, because then that's what we played first, and all I had was an acoustic. We get through the first course, and I'm just on pure adrenaline. I haven't slept in 2 days at this point. And Stephen gets really emotional. He's that kind of human being, and he just stops and he goes, "Where have you been?" And I get all emotional because I'm sleep deprived and I'm like waiting for this moment to happen. And so we hugged it out, and he goes, great, we're going to make beautiful music together. He talks about the Everly Brothers being a big influence and how we're going to be like that. And I love the Everly Brothers, of course. And so we talk about all this great stuff. And then right before I went to Istanbul a few weeks, I'd cut my hair really short. I just cut it, shaved it on the sides, kind of had a little faux hawk thing going. And he's saying all these wonderful, beautiful things. And then he says, oh, by the way, you need to grow your hair long. I'm like, okay, no problem. No problem. And jam with the band after that. And, which was a blast. It's very surreal. I've played with a lot of bands on big stages at this point, but this was a band that was important to me growing up as a singer, and mostly influenced by English bands that were influenced by the very thing I grew up singing, whether it was, the Beatles and the Stones and, Led Zeppelin and the Faces and Free, all those bands, because great singers, soulful, bluesy singers, great songwriting. Anyway, but Aerosmith was one of those American bands that fit right into that to me. And so this was special. I'm playing with them. We do Stop Messin', which Joe sings, because I take a little solo. And I'll be honest with you, that's not my real strength. My strength is I'm a singer who plays. And as a songwriter and as a producer, I know when not to play, which I think is just as equally, especially in a band like that. You got two phenomenal guitar players. Sometimes it's just grab the B3, glissando, keep the common tone on top, know when to change the fundamentals to get a different sound here, be dynamic. It's all in the expression pedal, knowing when to use the Leslie. That's why I love the B3. So I've got about 6 chops in my toolbox, and I used them all, and thankfully they loved it, and no, I mean, really, it's really just a lot of honky tonk type of piano, and it's a feel thing. I know guys who are very proficient who can play circles and chops around me, but they don't have the feel. How does it make you feel? They don't have the groove, and I think the same is for drummers. Joey was very much that way, unschooled, but man, his pocket was undeniable. We do Jaded because they want to see me playing acoustic. I play acoustic on that song. I didn't really know the live arrangement, which was one thing, I don't have the live version. And there's a moment in the song where we go, the music stops and Steven and I are held holding a note, and I'm a third above him. I'm up there, right? And I get it in the moment, but then I didn't really get a big enough breath that I normally would have, knowing it was coming. But I'm like, by God, I'm not going to let go of this note. I'm going to hold on to this note, whatever it takes. And I'm starting to see stars, and and Steven's playfully looking at it like he's got a watch on and he's holding a note. He's showing me off to them, Thankfully, I was able to get through it, catch my breath, and the band comes back in, and when they come back in, they all turned and looked at me and smiled. And then that's when I knew I got the gig. So then I like, great, this is awesome. They're all applauding me. That's awesome. Then I walk off the stage and I meet my keyboard tech, this guy, Bruce Hendrix. They call him Haystacks. He's a legend. He's worked with everybody. And his West Virginia accent goes, "You've got so much to learn. I don't know where to begin." And so he they give me files from the last live show, the previous tour, a laptop, a controller. The laptop had main stage on it, and I was able to, on my laptop with Pro Tools, go through and isolate what the guy before me had sang and played, and then learn the mapping. Songs like Elevator are really complicated with the mapping, and Jaded and some of the other ones. There could be 4 different parts going on. So I stayed up a third night in a row in Istanbul, marking all these patch changes into my iPad on Realbook. And if you look at those old pages from that time, it's like maddening. It's all these different colors and markings, but it got me through the first few shows till I got it under my belt because there was no rehearsal. And by the way, Aerosmith is very much old school. They'll just decide, tonight we want to play this song. And they've got so many songs. And I tried to get ahead of the curve, but there'd always be a song and they decide like an hour before showtime. Oh, we're going to do this one tonight. We're going to do Lord of the Thighs. Well, I've never played that before. And it's a big piano part. It's not a hard part, but it's a pattern thing, and it goes for about 6 minutes, right? So don't lose focus, right? Anyway, so there was that anxiety every show on that first tour. By the way, I had to go on my phone and grab a keyboard off that to learn. Okay, I think it's this, all right, and then find on YouTube the last time they played it to learn how they ended the song. They don't even think about it. They're just in their own world, and they're like, "Oh, Buck's a pro; he can handle it." And thankfully, I think everything up that point in time in my career, everything I had learned helped prepare me to walk into that, to not be the whack-a-mole, keep your head down, do your job, don't ask questions, and just be ready as much as you can. And look, if something flies by you, you just you fake it till you make it, right? And perform, So, and really in that situation with Aerosmith, it is all about the singing, which is fortunately for me is the right gig for me, and the right kind of keyboard playing that I like to do. So I'm really lucky, really, truly.
Yeah, Buck, I was going to ask you if you think about your duties across a typical set when you're on tour with Aerosmith. How would you describe the breakup of it? Like, how much is keys required? What are you doing there? How much are you singing? And you're playing a guitar as well, I believe, a bit of acoustic. So how does that sort of break down?
With Aerosmith specifically,
Yeah.
well, I'm pretty much singing just about on every song. There's a couple songs I don't sing on, like Back in the Saddle, or Dream On. But I do come in on Dream On the keys. I'm playing on just about every song. Some songs are more involved, like Crying. There's a lot of, I start off with the horns. Da 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 da, run on the organ. Da 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 da, organ, run. So it's that, and then the organs in the chorus. The mellotron flutes in the first verse. Some songs more involved than others, and some songs just like, say for instance, Sweet Emotion. I play a sample. Some of these are samples, of course, like the vibro slap in the beginning. And it pans left and right, and fun stuff to do like that. It still has to be played in time. The backwards snare, right? And what's interesting about that sample, when I first played it, I realized you don't hit it on the beat. For whatever reason, this is just how they got it off the record. You have to hit it on 1E. For the envelope to sweep to the backbeat, right? Which was crazy to me. And once I got it, but now I've got it, so I'm like, I don't want to change it, right?
Yeah.
But then on the end of the song, I go to piano. There are some songs like that, and some of the older stuff, like Mama Ken, where there's no keyboards on the recording, but if they had the chance to go back and redo it, they would have had piano on there. And so they have me play piano on it, and it just fills it up. And in some cases, like also with the Hollywood Vampires, where it's more organ, but it's nondescript. It's more this John Lord, and I have an effects pedal that brings in some amp sound, really crunchy 151, kind of sitting there underneath. It just adds a little power, kind of the glue for the guitars, know. So there's some of that. It's just knowing what does the song need. I always say I serve the song. As a songwriter, as a producer, as a player on stage, it doesn't need me up here on the organ. I love being up there. But for this song, we're going to stay down here, and we're just going to be the power chord, or sometimes I play riffs with the guitars. So it's just to add a little more bulk to the live sound that, in some cases, to recreate what was done exactly live on the record doesn't always work live. Sometimes you need to add a little more, sometimes you need to take away.
Yes, I was on that subject, Buck. I was wondering, and you sort of mentioned that you're trying to serve the song and sort of see what feels right in the moment. How much flexibility do you have in say, a band like Aerosmith to improvise or add your own pieces to stuff that's really well known, or are you trying to keep it to a particular live version, or are the guys pretty easygoing about that? How does that dynamic work for you?
Well, it's evolved to this point now where I don't remember if I did it or they asked me to do it. Um, but sometimes I'll try something and they'll shake their head yes, and sometimes they'll go no, no, don't do anything here. Uh, Not a lot of that. A lot of it it had been worked out over the years from other players before me.
Yep.
Like there was always been a piano on Mama Ken. I didn't add that in, but they want that there. And is, I would say on the most part, the parts are laid out. This is what needed. Now, as far as how you play it, like the way I play crying on the organ isn't like anyone else played it before me. I have my own style and it's a simple thing, but it's a feel thing. It's how you swell into that note. What fundamentals are you using? A little bit of sometimes just the 2-3 on the Floyd Kramer in certain places, that I will do on the organ in that song specifically. So yeah, I mean, I guess that answers your
Yeah,
question. There's only
Absolutely.
acoustic, by the way, on Pink, Jaded, and Seasons of Wither. And on Seasons of Wither, I play an open, like almost like a dad-gad tuning, and it's a picking thing. And that's a lot of fun to get to play with those guys on this. It's a beautiful song.
absolutely. And you raised a really fascinating issue before, Buck, around soloing, and you had your six chops that you can combine for a solo. I think you've probably made the day of a lot of our listeners and viewers out there, because I know even as a weekend warrior, I dread a band leader turning to me and say, "Take a solo." So, I mean, I'm sure it's evolved, and you're also understanding your talent there. But do you get called on to solo much? And if so, how do you approach that now? I assume that's a lesser stress activity than what it used to be.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. I think it depends on the type of song it is. I do more soloing in the Joe Perry project.
Yeah.
Um, he'll do some of the deeper Aerosmith songs, cuts that Aerosmith won't get to play because, they got so many hits. Like this last tour with Joe, we did Lickin' a Promise off of Rocks, and I'm playing the guitar riff with the guitars, which makes a lot of sense on guitar, but is like maddening on keyboard. It makes no sense whatsoever. But I figured it out, and I would take a solo like we did this one off of Nights in the Ruts, which is a very underrated Aerosmith album. Check it out. There's one there it's a slow blues called Reefer Headed Woman. And so I would take an organ solo, and I would think, trust your instincts, your ear, and melody. Whenever you can grab melody, in some places, there's the old drop, the things you can fall back to, that the tremolo stuff or whatever it may be. But a lot of times, like especially on a slow blues on a B3, just think melodically, make it sing. It's the B3 to me is most like a vocal,
Mhm.
because it sings that way.
Yeah, great. No, that's great point. And like you mentioned, Hollywood Vampires, and obviously the Joe Perry project, and there's some obvious overlap there with those three projects. But let's talk about Hollywood Vampires. Does that scratch any other itches for you musically, or was there a learning curve or particular, experience you had in getting involved in that project? Because that is an amazing project, just for all the personnel in that band.
Yeah, great people, great hang. I would really wonderful people. You know, um, I can't say enough about Alice Cooper or Johnny Depp. Thank Thanks to Joe, he has me in three bands. Um, so people can say what they want to say, believe what they want to read or see, but I know them personally, and they're good people. Anyway, I would say that The Vampires was more. The singing was certainly important, but not as crucial, as it is with Aerosmith singing with Steven. With the Vampires, it was more B3, more crunchy B3. John Lord. There's a lot of programming involved that, I always like a challenge. Like whenever there were certain songs they wanted to do, and I'm like, well, how are we going to do that? And I use a Kronos on stage, and I just started really creating, like Tommy Hendrickson, the musical director, and who produced and wrote a lot of the songs with the guys. He and I would, when we're in LA rehearsing, we would get up in the morning and would do all these big gang vocals. We would sing them, and Tommy has worked with the likes of Mutt Lange, so we're used to doing that. And we would do, it'd be 64 tracks of vocals for this. Hey, hey, and so I'm triggering some of that just to fill it up. And we're all singing, everybody can sing. And then there's some sound effects stuff. That was fun to do. And the thing about the Kronos, as you guys probably know, you have multiple outs. So the pianos 1 and 2 are left and right. And then guitar samples, I've created some guitar samples that are amazing. Thanks to Damon Johnson. Some power chords that I layer with piano or synth, which just gives a big ballsy sound to it, and it's a direct line. But the front of house can use the guitar samples their own line to treat them separately, and then synths, sound effects out of another line. Anyway, that was what was the challenge with the Vampires. There was a lot of programming that I haven't done before. That I think my techs were impressed. They were like, wow, do you really need us? And I'm like, no, I do need you.
Absolutely.
Just check my work, make sure it's good.
No, and so you raise a great point there about rigs. So both in context of, it sounds like the Vampires gig and your Aerosmith gig, you're probably talking different keyboards and stuff. But so let's just in context of Aerosmith, what's your standard touring rig?
It's actually the same rig for the Vampires. The Joe Perry project is a little, it's different but similar. It's a B3. It's a fantastic B3. It's a 69. This guy, I'll give a shout out to Nashville Hammond Pro Sound. Murph, the guy, he's the man. He found one for me that is it's just amazing. He just made it. It just sings. It's just, I don't know what else to say about it. We also added a Track 2 device that accounts for the different cycles in Europe, so it can play anywhere. As you know, it's different cycles, so it would play a half step down in Europe otherwise. And also we have an effects return, so I run that through a Boss pedal, multi-effects, I think Boss 50, I think is what it's called. Anyway, so I have like the John Lord amp sound. I have a compressor on one. I have a delay on another, and a wah-wah. So I have B3 through a wah-wah, which sometimes I do on a solo just because it makes it more interesting. So sitting on top of the Hammond is the Kronos, and we have it on a slider so I can move it forwards and backwards. And with the Kronos, you kind of got everything you need. You got piano, you got all the samples I've loaded in, strings. With the Joe Perry project, I take out my my Nord, and
there it is. Yeah,
take that guy, of course, industry standard now. I actually was one of I think when I walked into West LA Sound, I forget what year, and I saw for the first time an Electro 2. And I sat down and played because I used to go out I was playing with this guy, Matthew Sweet, and I would take my 200A Wurlitzer with my Music Man guitar amp, and I had the XB2 with the Leslie, and plus another controller. I forget what I had at the time, with a rack of samples. I had a huge rig for that thing. Anyway, I just love the Wurlitzer so much through the guitar amp, that whole Faces thing, but I had to keep tuning it. And anybody that knows anything about that, the taking a tine off and adding solder and filing it down and putting it back on, oh, not enough, gotta take it back off. Oh, I went too far. It was a mess. Anyway, And I sit down and played the electro too. The first time, I'm like, oh my God, someone finally got it right. You know, this is the Wurlitzer. And of course, the Hammond too. Just it was a beautiful thing. So I always had one of those in my arsenal. With a B3, you don't need it. So there you go. And there's no Wurlitzer really in Aerosmith. So, but with Joe, I used that. I run one side of the electro goes to my Leslie, which when I take that out, I have a 770
Okay.
Leslie, which is solid state, and it's a beast. It screams. And the other side, you can sign different sides on the 6D. The other side goes to a guitar amp, and it's a Fender Twin. And so for Joe's things, in particular, it needs that. It needed because there's not a second guitar player now. It's me. So I have to act like the second guitar. So to me, the Wurlitzer through guitar amp is like what the Faces was the second guitar. And
Yep.
or the Hammond full distortion, going through a Leslie. And then I have the Kronos underneath for piano and everything else, all the other sound effects, and it's a lot of fun. I get to create a lot of sounds, and I think that for me, if I can keep it to one or two and some sounds that I can, if I get more than that, I would like to have a real Wurlitzer and a Hammond and a controller, But I'll take what I've got right now. It's working pretty well.
Yeah, it sounds very appropriate for the job. Buck, in listening to you talk, I'm hearing a lot of love for the B3, and I'm just curious as to how that love affair started. And I'm going to guess maybe coming up and playing in churches and that sort of thing. But yeah, it would be fascinating to know how that's evolved for you and where your passion for the B3 evolved.
Well, it's interesting. It actually didn't come in church, believe it or not.
Uh-huh.
Although we did go to some churches that I used to say were just short of snake handling, where these backwater churches where they shouted and there was drums and a B3 and these old coal camp mining towns where they didn't have a lot of money, but they could sure sing and play some music. Anyway, when I moved to LA, one of the first album gigs I got was with this artist named Laura Satterfield. She's Rita Coolidge's niece, and she had a record coming out on a label. And I met her boyfriend, who was her guitar player, Monty Byram. Anyway, they hired me to be part of this band that was going to do this record, and I was going to sing on it. I had the Wurlitzer, I had a piano. And there was another keyboard player they hired, this guy named Bill Mason. Bill's played with a lot of people over the years. I think I don't know if he moved to Nashville. I don't know if he's still here, but he was from LA. And he was in Oregon. We called him the Reverend. He taught me everything about the B3. He grew up in an age where they had, the Hammond trios, and that's what he wanted to do. So he's on another level. But he taught me, he says, well, here's a good starting point. Here's the flutes. Here's the New Orleans setting. Here's the woodwinds. He'd show me all this stuff. And he said, now, when you turn on the Leslie from slow to fast, think of it as a singer, which I did instinctively. You start slow with a vibrato, and as you get towards the end of the note, go to fast, And he said, when we get to this chorus, we want to amp it up a little bit, or maybe you get to the bridge, you change the sound, your hands kind of always work in the fundamentals. But he said, really, it's all in the expression pedal. That's where the magic is, because that's where you get the dynamics, the emotion. And so he was a big influence and taught me a lot. The Reverend Bill Mason.
There you go.
Thank you, Bill.
And so, yeah, that's an amazing education on its own. And you alluded to before about John Waite, and you dropped Matthew Sweet's name, which is one I hadn't expected. That's amazing as well. I know you did, I'm assuming, some production work with the Doobie Brothers. Just, do you want to encapsulate, in 5 minutes, just the amazing production career and assisting all those other artists before we get onto your own amazing solo work? Well,
with the Doobie Brothers, I was just a backing vocalist on one of their live albums, that's that was heaven for me to sing with those guys and sing all the high stuff with them. Um, I didn't do a lot of recording with Matthew, but I did a little bit. And same with Shawn Mullins, and there's also this group called the Thorns, which was Matthew, Shawn, and Pete Droge. John, we did some studio stuff. In fact, I talked to John just a couple of weeks ago for the first time in years, because his guy who handles his catalog came across this song that he and I had written 20 years ago or so.
Wow.
Maybe 25 years ago, long time. And I always thought it was an amazing song, a ballad. And he was like, "Who's that singing on this demo?" And I was like, "Well, that's me." And the reason he knew about it, because I had sent it to his guy, not knowing he was going to send it to John, because during the pandemic, I went through a catalog of stuff, like what's a really good song that needs to be redemoed or redone, updated. And that's how I made use of my time. And that was one of them. And hopefully John's going to go in. He's thinking about re-recording it or recording it, because he just did a demo on it before. And that's cool. As far as anything else production wise, I had a band called Whiskey Falls that came out in 2007, 2008. And it was a country band, but if we came out in the 70s, we would have been a rock band, because it's kind of like the Eagles. I was, one of the songwriters, one of the lead singers, and that was my chance to do that kind of, Eagles, be Don Henley.
And it's amazing music, by the way, and we'll be linking to it in our show notes. I've listened to a lot of Whiskey Falls over the last week, and it's just amazing.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, Seven was the lead singer, and he's amazing. And of course, Damon Johnson was in the band.
Yes.
So we had guys who had been in creative, successful situations before, and we all came together. It's just one of those things. It all was going well, but then timing, the market crashed and everything kind of went away. But that's part of what we do. You dust yourself off and you pick yourself up and you go on to the next thing.
Exactly. And there's one other small production thing. There's some unknown guy called Carlos Santana. You might have had something to do with. Do you want to just briefly cover off that?
Well, okay, so I wrote this song I started it with Damon when we were out on tour with John Waite. I think we're in Milwaukee, we're in a hotel room, and I thought we had something. We didn't finish it. I don't think we even halfway finished it. We just kind of had a spark. And then, this was before we had Skype and FaceTime and all this stuff. And he had to go back to Birmingham. I was in LA at the time. About a month had passed, and I'm like, my buddy Jamie Houston, who I was in a band with, a very successful songwriter. He had a lot of success with Disney, High School Musical, Hannah Montana, all that, which I played a lot of the keys on, by the way. Of course, Disney doesn't credit musicians. They don't consider themselves a label, so it's a buyout. It's like, well, yeah, all right, I'll take the $650 and play. So some things would be like, I did a string arrangement for the first one that featured the female lead. I can't think of her name. It was a ballad, and I had used the Miroslav strings, and I knew enough about orchestration studying in college that I think I nailed it, for pop orchestration. And I turned it to Jamie, and he goes, "This will be great. They're probably going to re-record a real symphony." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine. I get paid my buyout." Well, the thing came out. Well, that's my arrangement.
Oh, wow.
That's my strings. That's my performance.
Yeah.
I did too good of a job, I guess. But then the next one would be the same amount of money. Oh, we just need some explosions on the top of the chorus. So you spent a day on one thing. You spent 30 minutes on another,
Yeah, okay.
Same pay, doesn't matter. So that's that deal. I'm sorry, I kind of digressed for a minute, but as far as Carlos Santana goes, so Jamie, being as successful as he was, and he was kind of, at the time, had made some inroads with people like Clive Davis. And so before that, I said to Damon, I'm like, we need to finish this song. Do you mind if I send it to Jamie and let us work on it? And he said, because Jamie's down the block in Venice Beach. So we started writing the song, and immediately we knew, oh, we got something really good. So we finished the song called Just Feel Better. we demoed it up, and at first it was to be for me as an artist. Jamie was, pitching me as an artist, and uh, it looked like I was going to get a deal with Sony, whatever. It all kind of went away, and then about a year later, he tells me, "Oh, we got a hold with Carlos Santana on this song." I'm like, "That's amazing." I've heard these things before. I don't get too excited about it, and then I hear, "Oh, it could be a single." I'm like, "Oh, wow, okay." I'm just thankful if it would have been a cut. And then I hear, "Oh, Steven Tyler's going to sing it." I'm like, "Oh my God. The stars are aligning after all these songs you write, and then finally one hits, and it was good timing. And anyway, but then like this tour, Steven hurts his voice during the tour, has to take a break. He could do, and it happens to line up right when they were setting up Carlos's single. This was the event of the year for Clive Davis, Steven Tyler and Carlos Santana. And so Steven couldn't do Saturday Night Live, couldn't do any of these big specials that would feature the two of them, on this song. So it got pushed to be second single in the States, which kind of killed it a little bit, but then it was first single internationally. So I think it did really well in Australia. It did well in other countries like Italy and Japan. Again, I was just floored that, it got that far, and the mailbox money that Damon and I made during that time period allowed us to be in Whiskey Falls.
Yeah.
Because when you're the artist, everyone else is making money but you until you break. But anyway, it was I don't know if I'll ever have a big cut like that ever again. I've had a lot of little things, a lot of things that I've been blessed to carve out a living as a producer. Now it's almost like you write songs to get the production gig, because the chances of you making money from the songwriting are very slim.
Yeah.
So, but as independent producers, songwriting is probably another skill set it's good to have in your arsenal to attract the client.
Speaking of production, we really need to talk about your solo album that came out in 2016, Enjoying the Ride, where you're writing, producing, performing. And for our listeners, again, we'll link to that in the show notes so you can have a listen to it if you haven't. But some really nice country rock, real tasty music, very, very listenable. I'm curious about what itch that scratched for you, Buck, and can we look forward to any more solo projects from you in the future?
Well, thank you for saying those kind words. I started to produce most of the songs, and then my main collaborator, I should mention, Charlie Midnight, who has been my mentor all these years. We've been writing for many years together, and all those songs we wrote together. He was working with this guy named Mark Needham, who is a producer, mixer, makes a lot of huge records, The Killers, Pink, Fleetwood Mac. So he and Charlie are listed as the co-producers, and Mark mixed the album. It was coming off the heels, sorta, of Whiskey Falls. We had started it much earlier, but then things kind of got in the way, and then it led to this release in 2016. It's funny how sometimes it can take that long, just legal hang-ups and you name it. There's a lot of different reasons. But yes, that came out, and the idea was to be leaning more country, so sort of those roots. So I'm really proud of that record. There's a lot of songs that are meaningful to me. I think the thing I'm working on now is more probably the real roots of who I am. Not to say that wasn't, but I think it was because of Whiskey Falls and being in Nashville, the connections I had. It was like, it wasn't not being myself, but it was just another version. I think what I'm working on now is just, I have nothing to lose. I'm doing this myself, and, it's rootsy rock. It's not that much different, really. I have all my friends on it. I have Damon Johnson on guitar on it. I have Brad Whitford from Aerosmith on it, and Joe Perry is going to be on it. And I've had Peter Stroud, who I wrote some songs with, lead guitarist for Sheryl Crow. him. He's on the title track, which is a song called "Tongue and Groove," which is I'm really excited about, and it kind of encompasses all those things. Tongue and Groove to me is like tells the story of what my dad used to say to me when I was a little kid, growing up in Shady Grove, Alabama, in our old house. And we got tornado warnings, and he would say, "Don't worry, son. This house is built tongue and groove. It'll withstand any storm." I had no idea what tongue and groove meant, but I wrote the song coming out of the pandemic, and it made a lot of, what I felt about it. My dad had passed away, and what we all had survived through in that storm, and because my wife and I have been together for over 30 years, and
Congratulations.
and we're built tongue and groove. So, and it's got all those elements of. To me, I said, just make it sound like free.
Yeah, well,
I'm just trying to be Paul Rogers. That's all.
That's right. How hard could that be?
Yeah, that's
I was going to say the record. Right. We're working on it. I think we're looking at a single release coming up. I don't have a release date yet. A few things we got to flush out because things have changed now with Aerosmith hitting pause. But sometime this fall, you could follow me on Instagram, BuckJohnson_official, and there are a lot of imposters out there, but you'll know it's me by looking at the number. And then, or Facebook, Buck Johnson Music. On X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, it's BJ Music. Anyway, if you follow me on Instagram, that's the best one, and you'll hear an announcement about when it's coming out, which will lead to an album eventually. But it's all done. It's ready to go. We just got to get it out there, Making the music the fun, easy part. It's knowing how to market it, right?
So of course, so true, and it sounds like we can look forward to hearing it really soon. So again, we'll link to all those those social links in the show notes, Buck, to make sure everyone can get an opportunity to hear it. But it sounds like it's going to be very much the essence of you and very heartfelt with that tongue and groove story. So it's a lovely phrase, and I love the way you've applied that to thinking about overcoming adversity and enduring and sticking through, just like the house in the storm in Alabama. So it's a lovely thought. There's speaking of getting through adversity, there's a question we ask all of our guests, and that is, have you ever had to endure a particular technical or musical train wreck on stage during a live performance? And if so, what happened?
Oh my God! All right, well, I've got it all time, probably, and let me guess. It has to do with the transpose button.
Excellent.
The dreaded transpose button, right? We think it's our friend. Now, it is when bands want to tune down a half step for the whole set. But if you're on a B3, you still got to play on the flat notes, which I don't mind in the Vampires. I like E flat. It's fun to play. Stevie Wonder, No, in 2002, I was playing with John Waite. And I was John was with a manager out of Atlanta that represented many bands that wanted to do something for a 9/11 benefit. And there was two shows, one in New York at an arena and one in Cleveland at an arena. And I think there was John Waite, of course. There was Sam Moore. There was Edgar Winter. There was Survivor, Night Ranger, Damn Yankees, Foreigner.
Wow.
It was a lot of great bands. Anyway, Mark Foreigner. So they needed a house band for some of these artists who didn't bring a band, like Edgar Winter or Sam Moore. Yeah, I'll do it, and Kenny Aronoff's the drummer. I'm trying to remember who was on guitar. Anyway. So, and the other bands would fill in the rest, when they, Edgar Winter, he would play, of course. And to get to play clav with Edgar and sing on Free Ride and sing with him was magical. Or Sam Moore playing B3 and singing harmony when Something's Wrong with My Baby. That was amazing. So we get to Night Ranger. And at this point, there was several other artists I didn't know that were part of this. And I had to learn about 40 songs, like in just 48 hours. It was a mess. And so I've got charts and stuff, and Jack Blades comes in to the night before rehearsal and says, "We're doing everything a half step down." I'm like, oh, gosh. All right, so I can handle the B3 on some of it because it's really not, it's not make or break. It's all guitars. I'm just filling in on a few places. But we get to Sister Christian, which is in the key of C. Simple song to play, really. The first half of the song is just you and the singer. But to play after learning all these songs and have to play in front of all these people and play in the key of B, I'm like, I'm going to screw this up, man. That's nuts. I'm going to hit the transpose button and play, a half step down and play in the key of C, Anyway, you can guess what happens. So we're in Gund Arena in Cleveland, and the singer, the drummer of Night Ranger, sang the song, right? So Kelly, he comes out and I'm playing, no one knows the difference, and he's singing, and then all of a sudden, "It's true," the band's chugging in, and I'm like thinking to myself, man, somebody's off. Who's off? Fortunately, my buddy Damon, who's sitting in with the band, caught it because he's on my side of the stage. And by the way, because it was such a cluster, of all these bands, where our mixes were terrible. Couldn't hear anything. And he yells across the stage, "We're in standard!" And Jack Blades just takes the last peg and goes up a half step. He plays on one string the whole song. And Damon proceeds to play the song off a half step, the whole solo, and he saves my ass, right? But, and I'm thinking, okay, I didn't really notice at the time, but at the end I got, "Oh yeah, by the way, Buck, you kind of screwed us over." And I'm like, "What?" "Oh, the transpose button." Oh my God.
Is there video proof, Buck? Because I'll go looking for it.
Thankfully, this is a little before everyone had iPhones with video footage, so I'm saved there. But somewhere you might can find it, but I doubt it. No, I mean, there was a couple times in the club days with my band that happened, but thankfully it wasn't that big of a deal.
No, great story.
I avoid that with all cost. It's like, I'll just play on the flat keys if I have to.
Yeah.
No switching back and forth.
Yeah. No, that's
of course,
great.
With the Chronos, I will tell you this. I'll confess. When we play "Stop Messing Around," I have a patch designated for that song because it's in the key of B. And to take a solo in the key of B for me on keys, not my key. So I transpose it where I can play in the key of A. But it has its own patch, so it transposes by itself, and I'm like, I'm not worried. That works fine. So I confess, everybody, I play in the key of A on "Stop Messing."
There you go. You heard it here first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Exclusive for our listeners and viewers.
And so, Buck, the dreaded Desert Island Disc question, 5 albums, and I understand it's hard, but we're going to force you to limit yourself to 5 albums you couldn't live without.
Oh my God. Well, it's just too many. Because, there's those albums that when you're young, like, and in our house, it was only gospel and classical, until I got in junior high and I started hanging out with friends, and I had older cousins that said, "You need to know these guys. This is the Beatles," thankfully. So, I would start with the Johnson Brothers Quartet, "Thank You for the Valley." They recorded it in 1970 in one weekend, sang it live. It's amazing. My mom's piano playing is stunning. Just 4-part harmony. It's beautiful. It's got soul. It's got everything. And it holds up surprisingly. And it's my parents. So,
and that's still accessible, Buck. That's amazing.
Yeah, I am creating a page to put it up on YouTube, Again, I qualify this by saying there are those albums because you're young and you're a teenager, and it's that first initial impression that hits you. And then there's albums that just aged over time, like, okay, this is one that just holds up. I could hear it today, I would put Elton John's Tumbleweed and Madman together because all those songs are written at the same time. Okay. Probably Tumbleweed because you got those Paul Buckmaster orchestrations. I have a song on my album that's I didn't write it with this intention. It just way it came out. It starts with piano. It's piano driven. It's called Wake Up Joanna. And I had my friend Seth, who's the MD with Aerosmith for these runs. He's super talented. He plays sax in the show. He's a brilliant arranger, and he arranged the strings. I said, just give me a Paul Buckmaster arrangement, and he nailed it. So I would put those albums as one, you know. All right, Beatles, I would say Help, only because when I was a little kid, I went with my dad to Woolworths in Birmingham, Alabama, and every hour on the Saturday they had a door prize. And my dad, who claims to never win anything, won. And what does he win? A Beatles Help.
Nice.
And he's just like, of course, I finally win something. It's this crap, you know, and he hands it to me, right? And so now he didn't think it was crap. He was just, you know, he didn't know it, you know. And so I'm like, what's this? You know, this is foreign to me, right? But you got Ticket to Ride, and you got Yesterday on there, and of course Help, and it was just like, wow, this is amazing. You know, that was an eye opener. But I would say later, Abbey Road.
Yeah.
You know, so you see how what I'm saying? It evolves over time. You know, I would say I would put Led Zeppelin in there. Probably Physical Graffiti. 2 and 4 and Houses the Holy are fantastic too. I would be a toss up. But Physical Graffiti, you've got more of the keyboard element. You got the clavs in there. John Paul Jones was brilliant. And I'm leaving off some amazing, more diverse stuff, but I'm just kind of keeping at the crux of what I am as a singer and as a musician. And I'll put an Aerosmith record in there. Why not? You know, although I hear them all the time, I probably don't want to hear any more. But if I were to pick one, I would probably pick Toys in the Attic or Rocks, because they flow like an album, you know, and there's a lot of deep cuts in there that I always tell people, look, if you know the hits and they're great, you know, Pump is great, Get a Grip's great. But those albums, you know, some of those deeper cuts, you know, Adam's Apple, Uncle Salty, fantastic tracks. And then I would leave it off with, I don't know, probably Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young. I was thinking of Stones record because that would be in there too, probably from the 70s. I could also say Who's Next. That was an influential record. I got that from my cousins, and I took it home, and I quietly in my own bedroom put it on the turntable, the shitty turntable I had, and put the headphones on, and I hear, you know, this Bob O'Reilly come on, and it's like another planet, right? And then you hear, you know, Behind Blue Eyes, which, these beautiful harmonies, that sold it to me. And then, so I guess Who's Next is going to be there then.
All right, there you go.
And then Won't Get Fooled Again, you hear this primal scream. I'm like, whoa, you can do that? You know, right. I mean, that's amazing, you know, so, but there's so many albums. We all have so many.
Some great picks, brilliant picks there though, but.
I love Joni Mitchell. I love Bob Dylan. There's so many, but I just thinking about what made it impact, you know.
That's right.
Viscerally as a young kid.
And I think it's fair to say you've made one hell of an impact yourself during your career, Buck. And there's obviously many, many more years to go in that career, but can't thank you enough
Your lips to God's ears.
Yeah, that's right. But no, if you cannot thank you enough for spending this time, it's hugely appreciated. And I know that the Aerosmith tour is going through to, it's quite a while, isn't it? It's quite a farewell tour.
Yeah, I mean, there's possibilities it could extend longer. Like I said, we're on pause right now, and it's just really about, you know, Stephen healing, and however long that takes. And hey,
we're going to get you down here. I didn't actually check, Buck. I'm not sure whether Australian dates are on the current tour. And
not currently.
So fingers crossed for that down the track.
They would love to. We'd love to.
Yeah. I
mean, right now, let's get through the dates listed. Let's get him back in the saddle. I know he was really disappointed because he was sounding so good, guys. The production is on another level. I've never seen more production. for this band.
Some of the live videos, Buck, just look incredible. They absolutely look incredible. Yeah.
So if you get a chance, we're going to give him whatever time he needs to be 100%. I know he was really disappointed because he was having such a good time and in a great mood. The band was sounding good, and usually by the third, fourth show, you're starting to hitting the stride, Yep. And we were getting there, so it was disappointing. But like I said, it could be a blessing in disguise, and let us get a chance to get home, because it's been 6 weeks between rehearsals and those first 3 shows. So it's like, I think everyone could use a break. Let's reform and get back at it, and then we can continue longer.
That's right. Sir, can't thank you enough. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, David, Paul, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
As you said at the start, Paul, what a gentleman Buck is, and what an amazing bunch of insights he provided.
Yeah, it was just really lovely to hear him talk about his music, his career, and some of his philosophies. And as I said in the intro, he sort of doesn't talk himself up at all as being a great player, but this guy has played with some of the biggest acts going around, and is highly valued by those people he plays with as well. And you can sort of see why when you think about his talents are given, but his attitude and his work ethic really shone through. So that was a lot of fun, David. I really enjoyed that.
No, it was great. And we didn't even have time to explore. Imagine being on a plane and having essentially a day to practice to jump in front of Steven Tyler at Aerosmith. And not only do you need to know the keyboard parts, but you need to be able to sing all the parts.
Oh, and you have to know all the songs they might call out on the tour. Yes. If they feel like it, even though they haven't told you they're going to do it. Like the hairs in the back of my neck were standing up when he was telling that story. I was like, oh my God, imagine that. I'd be sick. I'd be physically ill if I could do that.
No, so it just shows you the level of his experience. So no, great chatting to Buck. A huge thanks to him again for his time. And a huge thank you out there to all of you for your time. And a final thanks to our gold and silver supporters in no particular order of importance. Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew, very long-term supporter of the podcast. Thank you, Tammy, as always. Mr. Brother Paul Brown from the Waterboys. They've just announced they're continuing. I tell you what, the amount of gigs those guys play, they're basically touring the rest of the year, and I'm still lobbying for an Australian tour. So do check out the Waterboys. Thank you, Brother Paul, for your ongoing support. Elk Electronic in my hometown of Wollongong, New South Wales, a great synthesizer repair and education centre. They have some great online offerings. They even provide some of their own sort of modular stuff. It's just, highly recommend checking Ed and the team out at elkelectronic.com, all Ks in place of the Cs. And Mike at Midnight Mastering. I've said it many times. I get Mike to master and mix all my stuff, and look what a huge success I've become. And I think I've said this in another episode. Any lack of success is not on Mike, because he does a brilliant job. It's on my compositions. Totally recommend Mike at Midnight Mastering. And the musicplayer.com forums. I said we've been members for many, many years, and highly recommend if you like hanging out with keyboard players. Great place. And I do love the old style forums for a little bit more in-depth conversation versus social media. So thank you to all our supporters. Again, thank you to all you out there. And Paul, we'll see you again very soon.
Can't wait. Bring on the next guest. That was such fun talking to Buck. And stay tuned, folks. We've got plenty more good guests lined up for you.
We sure do.